The butcher baker, Robert Hansen, who was at first seemingly a friendly baker, later pleaded guilty to 17 murders in total. Robert Christian Hansen was born on February 15, 1939, in Esterville, Iowa, USA. Raised in a normal family, his Danish immigrant father owned a bakery where he compelled Robert to work odd hours. Robert faced challenges at school, dealing with stuttering, acne, and being extremely thin, an easy target for mockery. With his violent tendencies he satiates, and he turned to hunting animals, developing a passion for firearms. After graduating in 1957, he enlisted in the U.S. Army but was discharged a year later. He worked as an assistant instructor at the Pocahontas Police Academy in Iowa. By the early 1960s, he had a steady job and got married. However, violence lingered within him. On December 7, 1960, he was arrested for arson, burning the garage housing the school buses of the institute he worked at. He was sentenced to 3 years in the Anamosa State Penitentiary, and his wife left him upon learning of the incident, causing immense pain. Fortunately, luck was on his side, and he secured parole in less than 2 years. Upon release, he drifted aimlessly, spending hours in the woods hunting animals and resorting to theft for money. In 1966, life smiled at him once again. Robert met a woman with whom he got married and had 2 children. A year later, they moved to Anchorage, Alaska, where Robert decided to follow in his father's footsteps and open a bakery. The business quickly flourished, and Robert earned the respect of his neighbors. He also gained admiration for his skill with firearms, becoming the local shooting champion and making it onto the national list of top hunters. He was arrested for stealing a chainsaw and sentenced to 5 years in prison. During his time behind bars, he underwent psychological studies that revealed a bipolar disorder. Although Robert continued to have run-ins with the law, faking a robbery at his home and pocketing a substantial sum, no one in the community saw him as a bad person. They were all unaware that he was gearing up to unleash the monster within. This urbanization brought an increase in gambling joints, nightclubs, drug trafficking, and evil. Many women saw this as an opportunity and moved to the city with the promise of earning $50,000 a month. This is when Robert hatched a plan. Tired of hunting animals, he wanted to go further and make someone pay for his bad childhood. He started frequenting bars and alleys to find women, considering them the perfect victims. Most had left their hometowns and had no close ties. However, Robert wanted to maintain his family man facade, acquiring a cabin in the middle of the forest and a property on the outskirts of the city. In 1971, he carried out his first crime against a young escort named Lisa Futrell. This marked the beginning of a decade of terror in which Robert repeated his modus operandi with other women, offering them large sums of money for services and then subjecting them to unimaginable abuses. He would take them in his plane to the forest, making them believe he would set them free before shooting them as they attempted to escape. Over the next 10 years, Robert continued and the police didn't suspect him, and no one was concerned about the disappearances until the bodies started piling up. In 1980, construction workers discovered the remains of a woman near Anchorage. The body was in an advanced state of decomposition, partially eaten by wild animals. A few months later, another body of a woman was found near the same area, semi-buried in a sandpit, with a gunshot wound. This victim was identified as Joanna Messina, a topless dancer. The fact that both bodies were found in the same location raised suspicions. Forensic examinations revealed a more significant coincidence. Both cases involved .223 caliber bullets commonly used in high-powered rifles. On September 2nd, another body, identified as Paula Golding, was discovered with a .223 caliber cartridge near her. On September 12, 1982, while police were hunting in the same area, they stumbled upon yet another body, later identified as Sherry Morrow. She had suffered 3 .223 caliber gunshot wounds and showed signs of torture. The police now recognized a distinct pattern and recalled other cases of missing women in the region. When they added up the total, it exceeded 30. The brutality of the murders and the use of .223 caliber cartridges led detectives to conclude they were dealing with a ruthless serial killer. However, no one claimed the bodies and the case was once again forgotten until a victim survived. On June 13, 1983, truck driver Robert Hansen encountered a desperate young woman, Cindy Paulson, signaling for help on the outskirts of Anchorage. She wore handcuffs, and her clothes were torn. Hansen offered to take her to the police station, but she insisted on being dropped at the Big Timber Motel to call her boyfriend. Officer Greg Baker went to the motel, where he found the 17-year-old Cindy Paulson still handcuffed. She revealed she worked as an escort and shared her harrowing experience. A short, skinny, red-haired man with a stutter had approached her, offering $200 for intimacy in a dark place. Once engaged, he turned violent, brandishing a gun, forcing her into a car, and taking her to a house in the Wilton neighborhood. There, he subjected her to brutal torture. Paulson's survival marked a turning point. Once the man finished, he forced her to get back into his vehicle and drove her where there was a blue and white plane. He told her they would fly to his cabin in the middle of the forest. While the man loaded the plane, Cindy saw her life flash before her eyes. She realized she had a single chance to escape. She quickly got out of the car, leaving a blue shoe behind, and ran to the nearest road, where she found the truck driver, Robert Jaunt, and asked for help. After hearing the tragic story, Officer Greg Baker went to the police station, and everyone joined forces to apprehend the sinister criminal. Following Cindy's directions, the agents went to the airstrip, where they found the blue and white plane belonging to Robert Hansen. They discovered he worked as a baker in Anchorage, was married, and had 2 children. It seemed peculiar that such a man could commit such a heinous act, but they decided to interrogate him. Robert claimed he had spent the day with friends and that the girl was trying to extort money because he refused to pay her for services rendered. It was his word against hers, and the police chose to believe Robert Hansen. They left without even filing a report, as no evidence was found. For several months, everything seemed normal. Women continued to disappear, and the police's theory suggested they had left to try their luck elsewhere. However, more bodies of young women were found, and the authorities realized they could no longer ignore the wave of crimes hitting the region. Anchorage Police Department contacted legendary FBI profiler Special Agent John Douglas. With the clues provided by the police, Douglas constructed a profile of the killer. He suggested it was likely an unattractive man living in a remote place like Alaska to remain unnoticed. Attacking escorts was a way for him to seek revenge for past humiliations during his adolescence. It was also easy to capture them, as they moved around the city, and their disappearance didn't raise significant concerns. Reviewing the case files, Douglas found Cindy Paulson's accusation that the local police had dismissed. The police officers who knew Hansen described him as an accomplished marksman who boasted about hunting in the woods. This caught the FBI's attention. If he was skilled with weapons and took pleasure in killing, he needed further investigation. Douglas obtained a search warrant for Robert's house. On October 27, 1983, the inspection took place. They thoroughly searched his cabin but found nothing incriminating. They were about to give up when an officer spotted a hiding place in the wall. Upon opening it, they found various items, including a significant number of jewelry and clothing that appeared to belong to the victims. Among them was a blue shoe identical to the one Cindy. They also discovered newspaper clippings about the bodies found near the river. The search continued, revealing a substantial collection of weapons. At the back, they found a .223 caliber Mini 14 rifle. However, the most terrifying discovery was a navigation map marked with 37 different locations. Agents suspected these could be the places where he had buried the rest of his victims. Robert was taken to the police station, where he denied any involvement in the crimes. On November 13th of the same year, the Anchorage grand jury formally charged Robert with illegal weapons possession, second-degree theft, and kidnapping. However, murder charges could not be brought until ballistic evidence was received. On November 20th, the results arrived from the FBI laboratories in Washington. They revealed that the bullets found in the victims had been fired from the Mini 14 rifle seized at Robert's house. The markings on the bullets matched perfectly. The perpetrator proposed a deal. He would confess in detail to his crimes in exchange for being charged only with the 4 known homicides at that time. Additionally, he requested to serve his sentence in a federal facility instead of a maximum security prison. In his confession, Robert explained that his modus operandi involved hiring escorts and then kidnapping the He would take them on his plane to the forest, allowing them to escape. As they fled, he would practice target shooting with them, turning it into a twisted game to test his hunting skills. He emphasized that he never missed a shot. He showed investigators the map of the forest, marking 30 locations in Anchorage and the Matanuska-Susitna Valley, where he had buried bodies. The number of victims was incredibly high, but they could only locate 12 bodies. These were exhumed and returned to the families of the women. Despite not finding all the victims, Robert had everything to lose. The media dubbed him the Baker Butcher, and there were calls for him to spend the rest of his life in prison. On February 18, 1984, the trial began, and it didn't last long. They had bullets as evidence, found the bodies, and, most importantly, had the killer's confession. Psychologists not only stated that Robert was aware of his actions, but also enjoyed them cynically, giving victims the illusion of survival. While it was believed that the Baker Butcher had claimed the lives of nearly 30 women between 1970 and 1983, he only pleaded guilty to the 4 agreed-upon cases. However, a total of 17 bodies have been found since the start of the investigation. He was convicted of the abuse and murder of all those women and, on February 27, received a sentence of 461 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Initially, he was transferred to Pennsylvania Penitentiary, and in 1988, he was moved to the Spring Creek Correctional Center in Alaska, where he stayed until he developed a serious illness. His last days were spent in the Anchorage Correctional Complex. Robert Hansen passed away at the age of 75 on August 21, 2014. Despite being one of the most ruthless serial killers in U.S. history, he served most of his sentence in a common prison. To this day, only half of the bodies belonging to his victims have been found. This is quite unjust, but at least one thing is certain: he can never harm anyone again. What are your thoughts on this story? What do you think was the reason for Robert Hansen to commit crimes like this? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to follow for more crime stories.